Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have a very special guest back on for the second time, Dave Marsh, all the way over from Sydney, Australia. So it's tomorrow for him, but he's the founder of Perform Muscle Coaching. And yeah, I think he was on, I looked, you were on early 2025. So basically a year ago that you were on. So whole year has passed, man. Thanks for coming back on. How have things been going with you?
Yeah, thank you. Welcome. Yeah, thank you for welcoming me back on the podcast. Excited to have another conversation with you and see how this year has changed and transformed you and your business. For me, it's been good, man. It's been a very big year for me. Probably the biggest year in coaching that I've had ever, which has been amazing. Got to do some pretty cool stuff last year. We ran some seminars in Sydney, Australia, and then took them over to the UK. So went back to England and had a seminar in Bath and London. Got to present with Luke Lehman, the muscle nerds in
Nice.
London as well. Amazing. So we had some fantastic coaches that we got to present to and dive deep with. And then end of last year, spent some time in Peru. So went into a warrior retreat, which was a leadership retreat for business owners across the world to dive deeper, work on the kind of like more inner spiritual side of things with self-development, which is amazing. So it's been a pretty epic year, man, not gonna lie.
That's awesome. Are you originally from the UK? I think I remember right.
Yes, yeah. So I grew up in Cotswolds, so Southwest England, and then moved to Australia now 8 years ago.
Nice. And so you and Luke presented over there. What did you guys present on some of the topics?
Yeah, awesome. So there was myself, Luke, Alex, which is part of Pro Coach, which is one of the biggest UK physique coaching businesses, and then Jack Hallows, who's quite big in the kind of social media world. Luke presented more on stress, chronic stress, and HRV and the impacts of that on training adaptations and how to navigate that and how to integrate that into people's training and navigate those side of things and looking for, I guess, like almost like a traffic license system. So looking at like green, orange, red. And if people are in those categories, like what do we do? How do we navigate this person's training? How do we adapt it? So this person is going to be able to, one, get better results, but also bring them into either yellow or green and move them towards better health metrics. But at the end of the day, we understand the impact of long-term chronic stress on not just physique and body composition, long-term inflammation and changing your autoimmune and epigenetics and all those things. So it was a really powerful conversation. Myself, I went down the kind of more, I guess, like muscle mechanics route. So looking at kind of the impact of center of mass, joint limited range in terms of passive active mobility, how we can assess that with our clients, how we can inform better decision making when it comes to exercise selection, and then how to overcome some of the common issues we get around kind of hip, shoulder, spine, and how to overcome those things, and then drive better function. Because if we've got that foundational base of function, everything's going to be easier when it comes to strength, performance, and muscle gain. So getting all of those base metrics right is going to be really important. And then it's like most clients come to us with some sort of pain or discomfort. Understanding how to one, assess that, but how to make our decision making to overcome those things are going to be really important in our roadmap and timeline that we can implement with that client.
Nice. That is super important. Like you said, a lot of people do come with those issues and the stress side of things too, man. Like that's definitely something that's super interesting. I know, and I feel like Luke was definitely a big part of like really making that, bring it onto my radar there. Was there any sort of like big insights you had from that perspective? Or was, I know I'm pretty sure, I think you've told me you've worked with Luke, he's your mentor. So I'm sure these are all things he's taught you, but were there any other insights or anything or big takeaways or anything like that from that talk or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest things, I guess, how we take our normal metrics of, I guess, resting heart rate, blood pressure, HRV, and allow that to inform our decisions more. And I think it's when we're asking for clients to track this data, it's not because we're trying to control too much. It's going to inform our decision making, and that's going to allow us to make better decisions for them on the back end. And it's very different. I think coaching, there's levels to this game, and the way that Luke has informed the way I coach has allowed me to access different levels in terms of clientele, right? I work with mainly athletes and performers now, I would say, and allowing those metrics to inform my decisions, help them get better results. But I guess the biggest takeaway for me was the long-term impact of chronic stress, right? The impact on how that changes our epigenetics and autoimmune or drives autoimmune issues is powerful, man. And everything comes from a dysregulated nervous system. And even the work that I've done over the last year and diving deeper into kind of the spiritual world, understanding the nervous system sitting at everything. And when we talk about performance, me, it's changed. I'd say how I think about performance now is how present I am able to be. How present I am able to be in a grounded state, in a regulated state, that I'm able then to perform. I've trained a couple of big guys over the last couple of years, and Billy, who competed last year in bodybuilding, he has no stress. His parents own the gym. He's very well off, inherited a lot of money, and this guy is the just most placid, parasympathetic guy walking around. He's also massive. And I think a lot of that down, like the way he's able to lift weights is down to how parasympathetic this guy is, right? 'Cause he's just so relaxed. His nervous system is so regulated. He's so chill that when he goes to go into that sympathetic drive, he can switch it on, but then he goes straight back into parasympathetic after, right? So in terms of optimizing performance, recovery for strength and muscle building, the more you can drive that parasympathetic state, be regulated, then I almost say the better your results are going to be when it comes to then overall strength and muscle off the back of it. And bodybuilders have been talking about this for years, and that's why everything is so optimized with the way they run their schedules, right? It's because they know if they control all these variables to drop them into that state, their response from training and the adaptation they're going to get and how they can navigate all the, I guess, the variables of that to make it an optimal place to grow muscle will really drive their results. So yeah, it's interesting piecing all those pieces together and looking at it from more of a global understanding. And I guess the clients that would come in is understanding that every single person is one of one. They're going to come in with different structural backgrounds. They're going to come in with different injury backgrounds. They're going to come in different states and from lifestyle. Then understanding that person is one of one, and therefore our approach needs to be really adapted to that person where they are, meet them where they are. And then how do we push them more, like I said, into those kind of yellow and green lights? So it's like, all right, they're functioning well, they're healthy, they're regulated. That's when we can start pushing up the training intensity and driving the other things. Because if you're just trying to pour fuel on a fire, you're just going to make it worse. So I think just pulling back and knowing when to do that is going to be really important.
Yeah, I like too that you mentioned like the importance of obviously getting in that parasympathetic state, but also being able to get to that sympathetic state when you need to as well too. Because I'm sure that some people would hear that and think that they need to be in that state all the time, but like you could drive it too far, just like you can drive it too far on the sympathetic side. I'm sure. And again, that's probably less of a problem for most people, but you can still push it too far in terms of the parasympathetic. You need to also be able to, you want to be able to get up when you can as well too.
100%. And it's interesting, I think, going into that, right? Guys, like if they finish work, if they're working like a normal 9 to 5 and, they're going to the gym after and most people, what do? They grab like a pre-workout at 5 p.m. We know caffeine at that time is probably not ideal. It's going to affect their sleep because of the half-life. If they just jumped on an assault bike and just did 50 calories on an assault bike at relative intensity, guarantee they would feel better and they'd have the energy to go and train. They just need to switch that state because they've probably been sat down at their desk. Energetically, they're not in a great state. If they shift their state, that internal shift in their state just by doing some like slightly moderate to intense exercise, they will then be prepared to go and perform. It doesn't take a lot. We just need to learn to understand the state that we're in is going to control so many variables, and our ability to regulate our state and change that is going to really drive performance in the right way if we are able to manage it.
Well, and two, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you are in that sympathetic state like all the time as well too, which I mean, would you say that's where a lot of people that, hey, in their 30s above, have family life, job, most people are they probably spend a lot of time in that on the sympathetic side of things, right?
Massively. Yeah, absolutely. We live in a world that our nervous systems can't really handle the modern world in today's world. We don't get as much sleep as what we used to. We're constantly stimulated through either our phones, TVs, laptops. We spend more time behind our screens. So just from, I guess, a stimulus standpoint, the amount of stimulus and information coming in, our nervous systems can't handle it. So there's that dysregulation. Like again, most people have some form of stress, whether it's you've got your little one that you've had for a year and a half now, which has affected your sleep. People are working harder, longer hours. There's more financial pressure now due to economy. There's more stresses than ever. And I think most people probably are swayed towards the sympathetic state. And they don't know how to regulate it, or they're masking it with caffeine or other stimulants and things to like mask what is happening under the hood, so to speak. I think we need to just actually take a step back. And this is where, again, for me, like biometrics and blood work are a good idea for most clients coming in, because like, all right, let's take a look under the hood and let's make sure that all those things are in a good place before we start ramping you up. And even just simple things like breath work for most of the things that I recommend to my clients from a day-to-day lifestyle standpoint. We understand that breath is the easiest way to knock ourselves from that sympathetic into that parasympathetic state, just by controlling and regulating breath. I do it myself on a day-to-day basis. If I've gone from doing check-ins or presenting or calls, like I might just go and lie down on my couch and just do 5 minutes of controlled breath work and change my state and just bring myself back down to baseline, because I can feel myself getting ramped up. I can feel the anxiety. If I've had caffeine early on in the day, or whatever, again, that's going to have an impact. So again, being able to pull yourself out of those states, and even post-training, right? You and I both know you go and do a hard strength training session or hypertrophy session, and you're a little bit underslept or ramped. At the end of it, you feel jacked up. Your nervous system is ramped. And what do people do? They go straight from that, and they either go straight back into work or they do something else. And we need to allow ourselves that calm. So even just finishing your workout and just doing 5 minutes on the treadmill where you actually just walk, incline walk or go for a walk after and just control that breath. I tend to go walk my dog if I can. I'll get back, have my shake, and I'll just go walk the dog around the oval just to, again, regulate myself, just to bring myself back down to baseline. It's actually interesting. You might find this interesting. So in the lead up to the Peru trip I mentioned, we did something called a dieta. Now, a dieta is to bring your nervous system down into regulation for baseline. Obviously, when you're going to go and do plant medicine and those sorts of things, you need to be in a regulated state and you need your internal state to be good. So the dieta was part of that process. So we reduced phone time, so no scrolling, again, change of diet, so reduced beef, cut out citrus fruits, started the day with daily meditation, breath, all of these things. And it was very limited. So I didn't watch any TV, didn't have any stimulus during that time. I actually stopped listening to audiobooks or any kind of audio. So reduced my overall sensory overload and input. And what I found from doing that for 30 days was probably by about midway through to the third week, I actually found myself going back into that normal cycle of sympathetic and parasympathetic that we should go through in our day to day. I'd wake up, be a little bit more ramped, and then I'd have my breakfast. I feel myself kind of energy wise just drop a little bit. And then instead of going for caffeine, because I cut caffeine completely, I would just like, all right, just embrace that. Maybe go for a walk and just understand that energy slump is a normal cycle of our nervous system. Do my work, and then in the afternoon I get this wave of tiredness after lunch, which would be obviously when I'd eat lunch and then be knocked into parasympathetic, like rest and digest. And I was like, sometimes I'd had to just lie on my couch for 10 minutes, just give myself that 5 to 10 minutes, just going to sit here and just breathe, allow it to pass, and then go back into normal work cycles. But it was really interesting to go back to that natural nervous system regulation or circadian rhythm of our nervous system throughout the day, which sometimes I think because of caffeine and stimulants and things we are being exposed to, whether it's sensory inputs, we don't get that as much anymore, yet we should. So it was nice to feel that. And the impact on my sleep and how I felt, man, I felt so grounded, so present from doing it. I was like, this is fantastic. I miss this.
Yeah. And that was what you did during the Peru trip, or was that leading up to it that you needed to do?
That was leading up to it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did that the lead up to it in preparation, and we've actually it was a 6 month container, so 3 months in the lead up to Peru, then the Peru trip, and then a 3 month container after it, so a whole 6 months of a container. So we've actually just started a Dieta 2.0, which was a little bit more flexibility, so you can almost create it with what you felt worked for you. For me, definitely the reduction in caffeine was a big one for me, and then trying to reduce my screen time. It's been hard with the time difference in the UK being 11 hours at the moment. So I've had calls the last couple of weeks with like New Year clients and everything else going on, but I'm trying to stay in that regulated place because I felt great. And my nervous system definitely felt the benefit. My HRV went through the roof. Like my HRV usually sits around, I guess, 55, 60, which isn't bad, isn't okay for a strength athlete. It's going to tend to sit a little bit more like sympathetically ramped. But during the dieta, I actually went up to 80, 90.
Wow.
So it was like a huge shift up there, which is crazy to notice. My resting heart rate as well dropped. So again, resting heart rate sit around 58, 59, dropped to like the low 50s. So it was like more around the 50, 51. So I saw the impact and I felt the difference.
Yeah, that's a big drop, man. Almost 10 beats. Like that's definitely going to be super noticeable. Yeah. So what are some of the things now that's like really helping you stick with that? So you said obviously like still reducing screen time, but you're an online coach, so you're going to be in front of the screen a lot. So what are some things that have been working for you there, and what are you trying to work on with that specifically?
Yeah, good man. For me, it's making sure I start my day with getting outside. I tend to start my day with movement. I will get outside, get some sunlight, walk my dog, and then maybe do 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes of fasted cardio, just zone two work, just to get the heart rate going. Journaling. So again, I will start my day with some journaling and just meditation and breaths, just to one, set my intentions. So actually not overload myself with too much work for the day. Make sure I set my intention and have that time for myself before I start the day. I think that's one of the biggest things for a lot of guys I speak to, especially in the performance world. They're almost reactive, not proactive. So again, just shifting that state to being proactive and actually setting your intentions and the things you want to get out today allows you to be in that state. And then boundaries, man, like boundaries are the most important thing that we can learn as human beings, as coaches, as performers, because if we're not putting boundaries around communication with clients and the way we work, we're just going to be running around like headless chicken. So I think it's really important to enforce that in a healthy way. And boundaries are healthy. It's just people don't necessarily sometimes know how to communicate them. For me, it's just, hey, like I've had some conversations come back from Peru with certain friends and certain people will be like, hey, look, like, just so you know, this year I'm prioritizing X, Y, and Z. It's nothing against you as a human being. I'm just going to have less time to spend with you. That's communicating a healthy boundary. And I think we need to get better at that with work and clients and everything else. So it allows us that space, because spaciousness in coaching and running an online business is the most important thing. right? We need that think time. We need that space. We need that time for our nervous system to regulate. Last year, one of the best things that I started to do and continue to do is actually join like a local recovery center. So it's got your infrared saunas, cold plunges, big Scandinavian saunas, and steam room. So going there a few times a week, I really noticed the impact. Like I've got my evening switch off. I'm like, right, by this time I'm gonna stop work. And then I'll go there and do hour 15, which I'll sit in the infrared sauna for 30, 40 minutes. Then I'll do a cold plunge, like 6 to 10 degrees. And then I'll go into Scandinavian sauna and just again, one without screen time, but also going into that kind of deep meditative state where I just focus on controlling my breath, close my eyes down, allow my brain to actually process everything that's happened in that day. Because most of the time we don't, right? We go from work, then we go straight into another conversation or whatever it is. And spend some time with their partners or dog, and you're constantly on, but you've never actually had time to really think about what has happened in that day or process that information. So when you go to bed, most of the time people who wake up with, I guess, like active minds, which again, I felt the impact of that this week where I haven't had the chance to do that on a couple of occasions. I would wake up at 2, 3 a.m. and my brain would start going because I hadn't actually processed what had happened in that day or the conversations or the coaching conversations I'd had because I'd just been back to back and didn't have that time for myself. So time for yourself, one of the biggest things I think for me. And I've definitely felt that impact.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because it's, yeah, if you don't give yourself that time to slow down and whatever it is, I think it's different for everyone. If it is breath work or again, journaling or whatever it is, right? I think you need to find what works for you. I always just tell my clients, like, try and find something that just gets you to sit there and get out of your head for a little bit or just stop going from one thing to the next. But I'm glad you brought that up because like the sleep, I could see that being right. That's the first moment where now you're actually like doing that. And so then all this stuff comes to your mind. And that's like you said, that's why people have trouble sleeping. And then I feel like it's just a vicious cycle from there, right? Because now you're not getting deep quality sleep. So then the next day you go in, now your nervous system's freaking even more in overdrive. And then it just ends up being like a vicious cycle that's like super hard to break there.
Yeah, it's the impact itself. Like I said, this week, like I've had a lot of coaching calls last couple of weeks because every start of the year I always run like New Year quarterlies with my clients to dive deep and reset their goals and obviously get their roadmaps done for the kind of 6 months to 12 months of periodization we run. And then I've been, because of the time difference in the UK, it's like some nights I was like on call till 8:30 p.m. and then didn't have a chance to go to the sauna, and then try and get to sleep till 9:30. So by the time I've showered, bed, and then you fall asleep, I have no problem falling asleep. But then at 2, 3 a.m. I wake up and I just be like, all the conversations replaying in my head. Just kind of, I'm like, all right, cool, yep. And the next day, yeah, feeling a bit groggy. Obviously, don't really want to strength train. You can't push with intensity. I do always train. I just auto regulate. I'm still going to train because I know it's going to make me feel better. But then you definitely feel the impact. And be hunger wise as well, right? Your sugar cravings come on board and all that stuff. And you're like, yeah, this is not it. And this is why, again, I would say to my clients, it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze? And when I'm thinking about alcohol, we understand the effects of going out drinking, the impact of sleep. And then the next day, you're probably going to make some bad decisions when it comes to your food and everything else, because your hunger signal is going to be completely off, you're going to be tired, and you're going to be wanting something to make you feel that a little bit better. And then again, like you said, that vicious cycle just continues. You have too much caffeine, and then you can't sleep the next day. And it's just this constant dysregulated state that we're going to be in if we do all these things.
And I feel like when you're in that more kind of sympathetic state all the time too, you're just very reactive to everything, right? You just feel super reactive to everything. You feel super reactive to everything that's happening. And I feel like that's where, again, if you have health and body comp goals, those definitely coincide at that point. I know there's been a couple times in the last year where we've talked about my sleep, but I've had some days where sleep wasn't great. And then the next day, man, it's like, if I'm not aware of these, I could see where like all of a sudden I'm like my anxiety is just higher. Like I'm like, you know what? I'm stressing out. I have high anxiety, probably because I didn't get great sleep last night. Whereas like in the past, if you're not aware of these things, you just act on it, right? You don't even really think about what's going on. You just think hey, it is what it is. And so I can see that firsthand there with that.
The anxiety thing is big, man. The amount of rising cases of anxiety, depression in today's world is just going through the roof. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think one, our quality of life now in terms of like health is declining. We're more sedentary than ever. Activity's gone down. The consumption of whole foods has gone down. Now, like, again, I don't know what the water is like with you in the US, but here in Sydney, man, if you're not filtering your water and you're actually drinking filtered water, big problems.
Yeah.
Brain disruption, digestion disruption. Like when it came to Sydney, I never had any kind of digestive issues previously, and I didn't even think about the water. And then I got loads of gut issues, and I was like, "What's going on?" And then when I did my research on the water, I was like, "Oh, that's why I should be filtering my water here because it's that bad, the amount of chemicals in it." So there's all these things that are going to be disrupting you that you potentially don't even know about, and that's the problem, right? Awareness, unfortunately, is where people need to put their attention. And the more we can make people aware as coaches of these little habits and behaviors that they may not be aware of because they're running their normal lives, it's going to help them overcome these things and protect them and actually get them back into a regulated state that's going to drive everything from strength, performance, metabolic health, and all the other things that we work with.
Yep. Yeah. It makes all that stuff a lot easier. Not an easy process, but it definitely makes it a lot easier and a lot less friction when you can take care of that. You mentioned too, and I'm just curious, I mentioned you like to do some like fasted cardio and stuff. Are you again doing that for, would you say there's any sort of like long-term performance benefits or maybe like metabolic flexibility? Is there anything specific that you're trying to hit with that? Or did you just simply like the way you feel after you do it?
Sure, yeah, man. For me, like I will die on the hill that fasted cardio for, I guess, like fat loss is always going to be more optimal, just from an understanding of it's just like easier to mobilize and oxidize fat when you're in a fasted state. Like it's kind of on the other end of performance. We both know that if you're in a fed state, you're going to be able to drive harder, push harder because you've got more glycogen. I always say as a way, for me personally, as a way of managing one, blood glucose and oxidizing more fat and maintaining good levels of body composition. For me, minimum, I'd say twice a week of just 30 minutes fasted zone 2 in the morning. It's easy. I got an assault bike on my balcony. I'll jump on there and just go nasal breathing. Nice way to regulate my nervous system as well. Like last few days, I've had some pretty big days of kind of work and training. So it's just like this morning, got up, fasted cardio, took my dog out. And it's just like, I'm in a nice state to come onto this podcast and have a good conversation with you. So from a regulatory state, I find it fantastic. And also, like I said, I focus on nasal breathing only when I am doing it. It's just, again, drive more oxidation to the brain and knock myself into a bit more parasympathetic. For a lot of guys as well that I work with that are, I guess, more, I guess, strength or physique athletes, again, we want to balance out that sympathetic drive that they're going to be getting from their training. So I find, again, some zone 2 fasted cardio, one from a metabolic flexibility standpoint, again, actually utilizing fat as an energy source and mobilizing that, fantastic for maintaining good levels of body composition whilst we're pushing food. And even, again, from the hunger standpoint as well, it's like, I know if I jump on and do 30 minutes of fasted cardio in the morning, again, it's probably going to increase my hunger levels for the day. So if I do need to eat more food, get more calories in, if I'm trying to build muscle, it's going to drive those things as well. So yeah, a few benefits I find with that, and I feel good from it, man. Like morning movement for me has always been a big player in, I guess, my day-to-day health performance in terms of how I feel. And I think a lot of people, like, they will see the benefit if they do some form of kind of morning movement. It doesn't have to be a salt bag. When I was in Peru, we actually did 2 hours of somatic embodiment yoga when we're in Sacred Valley, and that was incredible, man. Like we did a lot of fascial release stuff to start the day, and then got into kind of almost like yoga flow, and then finished off with some ecstatic dance and just moving your body and actually getting out of head into body and being more embodied. Felt the benefit of that. My body felt great, energy levels felt great, movement felt fantastic, and actually moving the fascia and going more into that movement was good. So I'm interested in that space a little bit more. I have to say, Carlos, the instructor we had, was a yoga instructor which I'd never experienced that level of detail when it came to fascial work embodied in yoga, and then putting it all together in his own unique way, which is really powerful. So I'm actually going to head over to Bali in March and spend a couple of weeks with him. He's running a kind of a somatic yoga course and fascial training. And I was like, that'd be really interesting to dive a little bit deeper into that, because I've done yoga in the past. And to be honest, man, like yoga for me, I was like, I don't know, like
It's boring.
I feel the best. Yeah. And it's almost like a repeated cycle where I'm like, how many downward dogs and chaturangas can I do in one session?
Yeah.
And I came out a little bit like almost like the opposite effect, what you find for yoga, of people coming out like, oh, I feel so grounded and calm. I came out a little bit like more like agitated and frustrated. Whereas Carlos's yoga practice was so unique and different. And I love the way he started with fascial release and getting into your body and breaking down tissue and moving everything in a way that made sense. And then going into almost like a natural embodied somatic flow. And after it, I felt great. Like I was so embodied and connected with my body and how it felt. I was like, this is a really nice practice. So I think for a lot of people, especially guys who lift, like some form of regulatory activity that is a little bit more embodiment can be really powerful, right? Like once a week, I go to a breathwork class. That in itself, again, from a regulatory standpoint, reducing inflammation and getting out of head into body and spending that time to clear whatever needs to be cleared somatically is a powerful practice. Because I find a lot of guys, and you may feel the same when you're working with coaching clients that are male, they are very logical thinkers, right? Everything is in their head. Everything is like logically thinking, prefrontal cortex stuff, and amygdala. And we need to actually shut that down and get them into their bodies, right? Because there is a disconnect there. And again, if we talk about kind of relational things as well, and I have pretty deep conversations with my clients because we look at all aspects of their life. Men struggle in relationships because, again, they are up here rather than here.
Mm.
right? And as a female, you feel that because females are very much in here, not here. So it's, again, there's a polarity there, but not in a good way. And if you are feminine and the masculine, you want to feel that power. If someone speaks from the heart, you feel it. And I think as a man, the more you, again, if you're a busy man that's high performing in business, the more we can come from here down to here, regulate ourselves and be more present. That creates that emotional safety that most women or women are going to want and feel. And if they could feel that, that's going to create a better relational dynamic as well, which has been interesting to have these sorts of conversations with clients and dive into this world a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that is super interesting, man. And I think too, just out of the couple things that you just talked about there, it's we started with the fasted cardio, right? And just the ability to be able to, like you said, tap into like use fat as a fuel source. Because again, I think we can neglect that if just the way our modern environment is, right? A lot of people don't do that, right? So it's like you want to have both ends of the spectrum there, right? And then same thing with what you're just talking about. So if you're always in your head, you want to come out of your head and focus on, like you said, being more present in your body and stuff, right? So it's like that balance. And then same thing, even with adding in some that kind of restorative type movement that you're talking about too, right? It's you want to be able to push it, but we also need to make sure that we can switch gears and go the other way too. It seems like that's a common theme so far here with a lot of these things so far that we've discussed.
Oh, massively, man. I mean, it's like be like water, right? Which I think is a Muhammad Ali quote, right? And it's like, be like water, so we're able to just adapt and change to environment and circumstances, and just be hard when you need to be hard and soft when you need to be soft. And the more we're able to hold both in simultaneous like power in our bodies, the more we can adapt to that. And you and I both know, like strength training and hypertrophy work is very rigid, it's very fixed, and it's very all about creating tension and gripping as tightly as can, which is fantastic. But then if we're working with athletes or high performers, it's like being able to be adaptable and move in different ways and actually allow the body to be less rigid but still be strong is important. So I think for a lot of people, they can definitely benefit from using mixed modalities into the kind of like overall holistic well-being program or to drive performance. And again, feel the impact of that in a positive way.
No, absolutely, man. I totally agree. So I know you've mentioned your Peru trip a couple times. Maybe just kind of explain to the audience what you did there and what that kind of looked like.
Yeah, it was powerful, man. It was ran by a guy called Brandon Collinsworth. He's a Nike Global Performance coach and incredible rider. He's done some TED Talks. His mission is love and I guess like self-love, which is really powerful. And his writing has always been something that's spoken to me. I think he's a fantastic performance coach and globally recognized by Nike and has been signed with them, I think, for the last 10 years and beautiful human being and rider. And he runs something called Warrior Retreats. And this was the last iteration of Warrior, so his 10th one. And it's all in legacy to his father. His father was nicknamed Dr. Chocolate. He was the first Black American that moved to Peru to then bring hospital supplies to Peru and start charity. So he started the Dr. Chocolate Foundation in Peru, and that was to give back to the people of Peru and bring in medical supplies and things like that. Brandon took on that legacy when he passed away and continued to start Warrior, which was to bring leaders and people from all over the world into Peru to one, not only raise money in charity for humanitarian work to give to the charities and give back to the people, but also dive deeper. They wanted to do deeper inner work and I guess more, I guess from a self-development standpoint, like unlock Pandora's box and go deep. And again, going back to that kind of like presence and nervous system regulation, spend some time in the Amazonian rainforest with shamans, do some plant medicine retreats and unlock different levels to the game and I guess learn from these ancient wisdoms and codes of the people in the jungle that they can share with you. And man, for me, the impact of it has been immense. Like I feel my internal world has shifted and changed, which I know sounds a bit weird to say, but genuinely I do. And it's coming back from that trip, certain things that I will face with or my day-to-day or conversations or just situations I'd be put in, I just noticed how I responded or acted differently. And when we look at overall like growth and healing, it's always signified by how we change in the situations and how we make different decisions if we're faced with the same situation. So for me, I really noticed that coming home and the power of the jungles, man, like going into the Amazonian rainforest and just seeing this whole different world. Obviously, we did the Dieta, so there was a lot of nervous system regulation, the sacredness of the jungles and the people of Peru and the shamans and passing down their ancient wisdom of what they did. So I experienced a Kambo ceremony on the first night. Kambo is like a monkey bullfrog venom that they scrape off the back of these monkey frogs and then they almost burn you with a stick. So I've got a couple of dots on my shoulder and then they put the venom on there, which gets then into your bloodstream. And this is very much a clearing or cleansing medicine to clear any negative toxins or anything in your body. And for me, I found myself in a really beautiful place of groundedness after it. A lot of people do purge or they can purge. I didn't personally. I went in pretty clean, thankfully. I stuck to the diet and I did everything in preparation to kind of regulate myself and make sure that I stuck to everything they said. But it was kind of like a hot searing pain, searing, not pain, but feeling going through my body up into my head. It was quite intense for maybe about 5, 10 minutes. And then after it, I just found myself in a place of just beautiful presence and groundedness. Like the clarity I got after it was amazing. I just felt so present in space, pure bliss, nothing, no real head noise, which is amazing. So that was a nice preparation. And then the second day we went into the ayahuasca ceremonies. Now, I don't know how much you know about ayahuasca, but obviously it's one of the most powerful plant medicines in the world. And we were at the root heart of where it is made. We got to go into the Amazonian rainforest and actually harvest the ayahuasca with the shamans, which was an incredible experience. And then we got to make it with them. So we cut the vines down. We got to, again, be a part of it and connect with the plant ourselves. And then they brew it for, I think it's about 8 to 10 hours where they brew it and break it down, which helps bring out the DMT, which is the psychoactive component. And then the ceremony itself, we're in this big makoko. They start the ceremony by saying the blessings, sage to clear the bad spirits, and they put on something called a kirlos, which is basically a music to help protect the energy and protect the bad spirits and stop them from coming in. And then we drink the ayahuasca. And now, personally for me, the experience itself probably started to hit me within about an hour. Again, having done, I guess, some psychedelic mushrooms before, I was understanding what was going to happen. We started to see more geometric patterns and the colors start to change in a very vibrant way. And then the only way I can describe it is almost like a portal opening up above me, which was beautifully white light coming through. And then it felt like I got sucked through it and I was out of my body. I was no longer in my body, no presence in my body, which is a very different experience to me because when you have done any kind of mushroom experiences before, you are still conscious and present. Whereas this was, I was not, I was just pure consciousness almost. And the space I was in was magical. It was beautiful colors. There were almost like plant spirits and then also animal spirits coming through. So I saw snakes coming through. I
Wow.
saw eagles and almost like a Mother Teresa type figure in this beautiful color, like energy, and everything felt like energy. But every time I tried to focus on something, it would shift. So I had no control. And that was the interesting experience about it. And then for me, and it was interesting, I guess we sat in the Makoko the next day. Everyone would share their experiences. Every single human being on that trip had a different experience. So for personally for me, it then went into almost like a tunnel, like a geometric tunnel that I started to go through almost like hyper speed. When you go into Netflix and you choose like a series or a program or a movie, right? Imagine that at like hyper speed, but you're in like a 3D geometric tunnel with all these magical colors being like pulled down. That's what it was like for me. And then certain memories would come up as I was flying down this tunnel, and it would be like that's like the movies and series. It was like actual memories of my life were coming through for me. And there were certain memories that I had to sit with and potentially were uncomfortable or painful. And this is where I then felt connection to my physical body, where I actually felt physical pain coming through my leg. Someone was almost twisting and gripping it and tightening it. And every time, if I tried to avoid it, it would grip harder and pull harder. So there were certain memories that I had to sit with that were painful for me. And again, previously, like I lost my mum when I was 13. There was some obviously trauma and suppression there. And I had to sit with that and sit through those memories. And then there were some beautiful memories come up, and different kind of like spirits came. My mom came to me at some one point. It was a very powerful experience. And then the purging happened. So there was times during this process where I felt it was almost like a snake coming through my body. It's the only way I can describe it. And every time I tried to, I felt a little bit nauseous. I would try and control my breathing, go back to conscious breath to regulate it. And then towards the end of the ceremony, I was like, this thing wants to come out and I'm not in control. It literally brought me to my knees and I actually prayed. And for the first time in my life, I prayed. I was like, Mother Ayahuasca, I surrender, I let go. And then that's when it came out of me. And it was like cathartic purging, deep cathartic purging. And after it, I felt again pure bliss and happiness. It was a different experience, really unique, different experience. And honestly, what came out of me was not normal vomit at all. When I looked at my bucket, and I'm that weird guy that would be like, I'm interested. It was kind of like this weird black liquid. I was like, where the hell did that come from? Right? It's just different. So that was my first experience and it was powerful. And after it again, I just felt a sense of complete inner peace and noticing how that then unfolded and over the trip. Obviously, we did this at the start to start the trip. So we dove deep, spent a lot of time with the brothers. We did some beautiful ceremonies with the guys to open her up. So sharing circles, witnessing circles, anyone wants to share and express. A lot of it was based on a guy called Francis Weller. Francis Weller was a psychotherapist in the same league as, I guess, Young, and his work is very much soul work. So living a soulful life and deep soul work. So this is the premise of a lot of the teachings and learnings that we were unfolding during the retreat space. So sitting around the fire, expressing, being witnessed by others. There was a few people there that have been through some pretty traumatic times. So hearing each other's stories and allowing people to feel seen, heard, feel part of a family and community and was really powerful in a different way. And even the women that came on the trip, they were just expressive and saying that how beautiful it is to be surrounded by such beautiful men that are willing to do this deep work. So that in itself is amazing. And then from there we moved to Cusco. Cusco is about 2,400 meters above sea level, so very high altitude. We then went into some different workshops. Started the day with something called Pray with Your Legs by Brandon. So when he used to live in Cusco with his dad, there's stairs at your 2,400 meters, and he did an hour of stair sprint. So you go from one at the bottom of Cusco to the top, up and down as many times as you can in an hour. Man, disgusting. Like I've done some pretty disgusting metabolic workouts and indoor training over my time, but this was something else. You can't breathe, and like your legs just feel like jelly because they can't get enough oxygen in. So
Sorry, this is high altitude as well, right? Okay.
yeah, so you're 2,400 meters above sea level. So we
Wow.
actually had oxygen tanks in the hotel that you could be hooked up to if you wanted to, just get some oxygen in. That afternoon, I needed to because I felt a bit nauseous with the altitude sickness. And they give you the cocoa leaf. So cocoa leaf is what they make cocaine out of, but it's the actual leaf. But they give you that to chew on to help again with the altitude sickness and everything else, just to keep you okay. But that was the hardest thing I did, man. Like we couldn't run up the stairs. You were like fast walking upstairs and then you can run back down. I think I managed to get 4 rounds in. They were like, oh man, for a big guy you can move. I was like, thanks. I think I came like fifth or something, so I keep myself relatively fit. But it
Yeah.
was that and then we started the humanitarian work. So visited some local hospitals and orphanages. They'd been rescued from sex trafficking, and the girls' orphanage had to be hidden behind the boys. So again, they didn't know where it was, just for protection standpoint. We can obviously take any photos or anything like that, just for purely protection. But giving back to medical supplies and then bringing them Christmas gifts. And actually, we did something called a dream circle in the orphanages, which was allowing the space and creating a circle for the women and the girls to express their dreams, what they wanted to achieve in life. And a lot of these girls, they wanted to become lawyers or policemen or policewomen and give back and actually stop people from going what they had experienced in their life, which is powerful. And some of the money and the work we did in terms of charity got given to them to help fund these things. So it's really heartwarming. I think obviously the start of the trip with the ayahuasca and opening us up and then going into the kind of give back to the people. We planted trees in Sacred Valley with local kids, built playgrounds and did all this work. And then obviously did some beautiful things in terms of hiking Machu Picchu and spent some time in Sacred Valley, which again are just beautiful places. You've got the Andes in the background, which are these incredible mountains, and just you can feel the sacred energy there. And it's a very untouched place in terms of the westernized world. And you feel that with the people because the give back there and how present they are and just how heart-led they are is just something that I've never experienced before. It's my first time in South America. I don't know if you've been. I fell in love with the place, man. I really did. And the people there is just very different to Sydney and the Western world and what I grew up in the UK. So
Yeah.
it's changing in many ways, man.
No, that's awesome, man. Super powerful stuff, dude. That was that's crazy. I felt like I went on that ayahuasca trip with you there. No, that's super cool though. And this was like what, like you said 3 weeks kind of time frame, 4 weeks that you guys were
Yeah,
gone?
for 3 weeks. So we started in Lima and then went to Iquitos, which is near the Colombian border. That's where we went to the Amazon. Then from Iquitos went to Cusco. We were there for 5 days. Then got the train to Machu Picchu. So stayed at the local, it's called Ambo, which is the local town near Machu Picchu. Hiked that and then finished off in Sacred Valley for 5 days. And then I had a few extra days in Cusco before I came back to Sydney. So yeah, an amazing trip, man. I highly recommend going and spend some time with that. So I'm excited to go back. So now we're able to go back to the lodge as we help fund it at any time. So I'm looking at going back in 2027 and taking some of my kind of coaching team down there. And next year is a bit of a charity give back and people who want to dive deep and do more of this work, then the opportunity is there.
Yeah, no, that's super cool, man. Would you do the ayahuasca again?
Yeah, you know what? I've been called to it, man. I've definitely been called to it. It's interesting. So the second day we had a second ceremony. And the second ceremony, they're like, they kept brewing the ayahuasca, so it's going to be a little bit stronger. If you want a bigger cup, you can. It's going to be a little bit stronger. So I put my hand up to go a little bit deeper, and I actually didn't get much or as much from the second ceremony. I didn't get sucked into the kind of different world, so to speak. And the next day, I spoke to the shamans about it, and one of the guys, Edwin, who did all my blessings, he during the ceremony, you get pulled to the front and the shamans put these arcanas on you and blessings, which are basically like protection spells. And he said that he could feel that I have some form of special gift. Don't know what that is, but people who have these gifts potentially have like more blockages or energetic blockages for them to unlock whatever that is. So he said you'll probably need to come back and do a longer dieta. So instead of doing a 30-day dieta, which is a diet leading up to it, do like a 60-day and then do maybe a longer ceremony. Obviously, we did 2 ceremonies over the space of 3 days with the Cambo. He said potentially you need to come back and do a little bit more because, yeah, like I said, my inner world's changed. I feel different. I feel grounded. My perspective has shifted a little bit. And for me, I think just aligning myself with more give back in the world is going to be where I put my attention this year for my business and how I'm able to be more integrated with local charities and what they can do in the local communities a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, man. What the reason to do that 30-day diet, and they said for you up to 60 days, what is that? Is that just getting, what's the rationale behind that?
So it's everything from a nervous system regulation. So bringing yourself back
Gotcha.
down to baseline, bring nervous system down, and also bring digestive system down in terms of inflammation as well. So even like you had to cut out citrus fruits, you had to cut out fiber for the last couple of weeks.
All
Bring
fiber?
everything.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like I'm literally like cutting the edges off cucumber and tomatoes and things like that,
Wow.
just to right down to baseline. No sodium as well, so no salt. So you are, again, removing most things in your diet to allow the ayahuasca to go through your system. And you feel it, man. When you drink it, it feels it's like a snake, like I said, working through your body and almost like clearing. It was weird. It was interesting. Like it was almost like a snake licking your internal organs and then coming out. But my nervous system now feels like it's had a complete reset. And
So
again, there's
go ahead.
interesting stuff about this, which I'll happy send you after this. If you look at the research on ayahuasca and what people experience, and they've done some, I make smaller term research on this, obviously not massive groups because it's hard to get like a massive group of research people to go and do ayahuasca.
Right.
But all of it is really positive on a nervous system, on anxiety, depression, in terms of connection with self, reducing symptoms, inflammation, autoimmune, all these things. There's some really powerful research there. So it was great to experience that and feel, I guess like I said, the sacredness and the lineage of it was amazing. So
Yeah.
grateful, really grateful.
How did during that time when you're doing this, cutting all this stuff out like that, like one, how was your training? Did you have to change that up? How did all that work out? Did you lose weight? I would imagine maybe even lost some weight potentially.
Yeah, it was tough, man. We had to cut out dairy and all these things. So I made a lot of changes. I went to a plant-based protein powder and I was literally just making it into a paste. So a little bit like unsweetened coconut milk, just kind of like mixing it in and making it into almost like a paste and just having it with some berry. We were allowed berries, so we didn't have to cut all fruit out, but the berries were allowed. So I'd like make a paste of protein powder with some like berries. But training wise, it was interesting the last couple of weeks when I cut down sodium. I couldn't contract muscle as
Interesting.
hard.
Yeah.
So again, that kind of like uptake of muscle glycogen through sodium, that kind of pathway was definitely less, and I wasn't able to push as hard. I definitely lost more or lost weight. Body composition wise, actually just got leaner, improved, but I probably lost a little bit of strength of muscle, but I wasn't too concerned about it. It was more about bringing my nervous system into base, and I felt good from it, man. I think from a year that was pretty busy, I think allowing myself and my nervous system to come back down to baseline and give myself that spaciousness and not push my training as hard actually did me the world of good. And then when I was in Peru, obviously I didn't really train for 4 or 5 weeks because came back straight into Christmas, was up in the mountains with some friends and things like that. So my strength training was off the cards for about 5 weeks, which is probably the longest I think I've ever not strength trained, which was interesting.
Yeah, that's for someone that likes to lift. That's like almost an eternity to not do that. But like you said, I'm sure it was, again, it wasn't like you weren't focused on body composition during that time. That was lower on the priority list at that time. So again, you're going to take that trade off there. So now that you obviously took that time off, and you said you felt better, like overall body felt better. Do you think that was from taking time off train, or do you think it was all the other things and combination of it? And maybe you just need it. It was probably good for your body, maybe to take a couple weeks off from lifting after doing it for, I'm sure, most of your life. So
Yeah, I think a combination of everything, man. I honestly can't remember the last time I took time out of my business. So I was pretty much off the grid from my coaching clients for 2 weeks, which was the first time I think I've done that in a long time. I had my assistant coach look after all my coaching clients from a communication standpoint, a check-in standpoint. So actually taking that space away from my business to create that like space for myself was amazing. And then again, like I said, just allow my nervous system to come back to baseline and just have gentle movement, but still do some runs and like I said, to pray with your legs and things like that. So we were active, but I just wasn't lifting. And diet wise, we're still eating really well, lots of organic, fresh food. Obviously, they were very good with the diet and what they provided us. Everything was really high nutrients dense food. So actually, my body composition stayed pretty good whilst I was there. Like I didn't see too much change, just maybe a little bit drop in muscle mass. But again, the kind of like benefit to that in terms of how I felt with like presence and groundedness and everything else was the impact of that. So yeah, swings and roundabouts, man. It's always that push and pull, I think, when it comes to our training and just day-to-day life, right? It's understanding that, or not getting too attached to things. I think in today's world, especially a lot of lifters that I speak to and work with, they really struggle to detach themselves from their training sometimes, right? And everything's got to be perfect, and they actually don't know when to take a pullback or a deload or allow themselves that space. And we're not going to lose crazy amounts of tissue. If we look at the research on this, and you don't train for a week, it's very minimal what you actually lose. A lot of it is actually just neurological skill. So as long as you're getting enough protein in and moving, you're fine. And I think actually sometimes that can be the best thing you can do if you've definitely got other things going on in your life. We can touch on grief, I think is an interesting one. Obviously, most of our clients and ourselves as well will experience grief at some point in their life. And the grief is a very interesting emotional stress that metabolically will really change a lot of things for you if you don't allow yourself to kind of sit with it and process it in the right way. And for a lot of people especially clients that have experienced grief, it's helping them navigating that without feeling the pressure of having to go and train and do all these things. The impact of that on their metabolic health can be really quite detrimental. So again, just giving them that spaciousness and being like, hey, look, guys, you're going to be fine. Right, just make sure you eat, go for walks, do the things that are going to make you feel good. You don't need to worry about putting more pressure on yourself and actually going to the gym. Like you're not necessarily going to lose too much tissue as long as you maintain your cadence of nutrition and protein intake. Just allow yourself to bring that nervous system into a place where you feel ready to actually start training and lifting again. Because right now, it's not going to do you any good if you try and go to the gym and just ramp yourself back up and try and push through it and always distract yourself from your emotions, which I think this is where the coaching world sometimes, and I hate to bring the bodybuilding world to light, but it can be a distraction from emotions, right? Where they're just like using discipline as a way to distract themselves from emotions and suppress through their training or whatever it might be that they may not be dealing with, instead of actually sitting with it and allowing themselves to process it sometimes. And I'm really selective and careful who now I bring on board to work with if I'm going to take them to a physique stage or bodybuilding type show, because again, I want them to be doing it for the right reasons and not have any underlying stuff that they haven't dealt with. And I think I'm really cautious on my onboarding if they are coming in for that reason, because it's like, all right, why do you want to do it? Tell me, like, make sure it's for the right reasons and that they want to be an athlete for that, and they're not actually just trying to distract themselves away from whatever it is they're not willing to face
or feel like they need to do it for whatever reason too. But yeah, no, go ahead.
No, exactly. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say, I completely agree with the pressure of doing something because they feel like they should. Or I definitely did that in my younger years of being a PT. Went down that route and competed in the bodybuilding stage. I was just like, listen for me. Like, I enjoy the training, the fatigue stuff, stepping on stage with the bodybuilder. Nah. But it's kind of like the rite of passage that I thought was the right thing to do in that time of my life.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I feel like people, it's almost like they feel like they need to do it to get in shape. It's like, all right, we could do a million other different things. We don't have to go to that level of extreme if we don't want to. So for your training, then now that you're back, we talked about, hey, what does ramping back up look like for you? What are you looking to work on for the next little bit in terms of your training?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. For me, just getting back to baseline. So I've actually put myself into more of a GPP phase of just getting my body back to like more metabolic health. So just tightening up a little bit, dropping some body fat. So going back to calorie tracking and just tightening that up. So I like to push my protein pretty high. So bringing my protein up to around about the 250 grams mark. And then I brought my carbs down to about the 150 mark. And then I'm pushing fats around about 70, 80. So a little bit more of a higher protein, higher fat, lower carbohydrate blend at the moment. I find with protein, just to leverage that as much as I can. For me, I find that one satiating, but also it allows me to, again, reduce body fat and keep calories in a nice place. Cardio wise, going back to my zone 2 fasted cardio, which you mentioned. So again, 2 or 3 times a week, just 30 minutes on the zone 2 bike, just again, to get into that kind of like fat mobilization standpoint. And then trainings wise, going to GPP. So again, upper lower with 1 to 2 days rest in between, upper lower 1 to 2 day rest in between, depending on how I feel and what I've been up to. And then doing a little bit more density in my workout. So again, I'm not pushing crazy RIR or close to failure or close to proximity of failure. I've been doing quite dense workouts. So my lower body session's been front squat for 6 to 8 into sled push up and down with a relative heavy load, and then resting and then going back around and doing 4 rounds of that, and then going into a hip hinge, into then some broad jump. So again, putting some plyo work in there to get my body used to jumping, absorbing force and elasticity, and then keeping that plyo work into the warm-ups as well, just to get everything moving. And then finishing off with a little bit more like unilateral work, so either Bulgarian split squats, lunges, and then some metabolic conditioning at the end of it. So again, finishing off with 5 to 10 minutes of like higher metabolic conditioning. just to get everything moving into a good place. And then upper body, again, warming up. So going through thoracic rotation, shoulder stability work. So a lot of kettlebell work in the warm-ups, dead hangs as well, just to improve my grip strength and get that kind of overhead mobility and open up lats and chest a little bit more. And then get the rib cage moving through like hanging leg raises. And I really like doing the GHD reverse crunch. So almost like opening up with thoracic on the back of that and getting a nice big stretch through thoracic and then taking the trunk through a nice big range of flexion extension, and then adding in more rotational work into that warm up as well, going into kind of kettlebell arm bars and windmills, and then getting the spine moving through that kind of like side frontal plane. So 45-degree side bends just to open up the rib cage and get everything stacked nicely. And then again, quite a lot of density in my kind of upper body workout. So pull-ups, bench press, superset for 4x6 to 8. Again, keeping like 3 to 4 reps in reserve, and then putting in some kind of rotational med ball slams to get, again, shoulder mobility and rotational work in there. And then finishing off with more volume. I always drive more volume for me personally into kind of chest supported rows and things like that, just to drive a little bit more posterior expansion. I'm naturally a wider human being, so wider infrasternal angle. So again, just to help with that posterior expansion and remove the compressional forces that get on my rib cage, I find that really helps. And then just finishing off with, again, some more unilateral based and shoulder things. So again, unilateral single arm cable lateral raises, just to again work a little bit more at the serratus anterior oblique sling. And then again, single arm cable work for my arm work. So again, just single arm facing curl, single arm facing away, and then single arm overhead tricep extension, just to challenge a little bit more shoulder stability and rotator cuff muscles and allow for a little bit of rotational force to be put on my shoulders, just to get everything moving nicely and everything stable again. So then I can start producing force, because I definitely feel like my internal stability is gone after 5 weeks of not really training. Like normally I'd be pressing like 42 and a half, 45 kilo dumbbells. And I was doing that at 25 kilo dumbbells last week. And I was just like, by the end of my set, I was just like shaking with probably a few. And I was like, yeah, I gotta build this back in. I'll run that now for probably 6 to 8 weeks, see how I feel, and just get back into it, and then keep an eye on body composition. And then I'll start to again flip the switch, bring protein down a little bit, push carbohydrates down a little bit as my body composition starts to change. And then I can push up my training intensity a little bit again.
You said push carb in, protein down, or up?
Yeah, so bring my protein down. At the moment, I'm sitting around about 250. Carbs are like 150. So I'll bring that protein down to probably around about the 200 mark, and then put carbohydrates up as it starts to
I see.
improve. And then I can push up my training intensity a little bit more. So just flip that around a little bit, and then I can build on that.
I see. Okay, because I thought you said carbs down, so I'm like, wait, that doesn't make. But you're gonna bring carbs up. That makes sense now. Okay.
Yep.
So for you then, like you'd say this kind of like from a nutrition perspective, are you trying to aim for a small deficit, or is it like just maintenance, more so hitting your macros, or what do you?
Yeah, so for me, it's going to be a small deficit, about 15% for me. So 15% deficit, and then to see how my body responds. Like it's reestablishing baseline, like again, bringing one activity up, but also then bringing my calories to place and just seeing how my body adapts for the next couple of weeks. So yeah, I feel I've had a pretty busy start of the year with lots of coaching calls and things like that. So I know my stress has been a little bit higher than normal. So just again, I find just bringing carbohydrates down, flushing through inflammation, and just having a slightly higher protein, high fat diet works well for that. And then when I start to increase training intensity and work settles down a little bit more, I can again flip the switch and move back into a place where I can push more carbohydrates.
Yeah. What's like a long-term goal for this year? Is it just keep staying in peak health, or are you trying to do anything specific performance-wise or body comp-wise or anything like that?
Yeah, good question, man. Last year, towards the end of the year, I actually decided to push myself when I turned 33 last year. So I built up to running 33K. So I got back from the UK trip. So it was like, right, I'm going to challenge myself to run 33K in 8 weeks. So that was a performance goal of mine, the longest I've ever run. And that was cool to work up to that. For a bigger guy as well, like for me, rotation is not the best trait of mine in terms of moving in that plane of motion. So again, to work through that was pretty cool and get to that place. This year I haven't really set necessarily a performance goal yet. I want to establish a baseline, and then I'm like using this period of time to work through it. Like I've got 3 months of integration calls with the Warrior guys, and I'm just planning out this year. I want to explore, like I said, more of the somatic embodiment yoga stuff in March in Bali, and integrate a little bit more, I guess, more subtle movement. Performance wise and body comp wise, just get my back to where it was. And then I quite fancy challenging myself and maybe doing like a 50K ultra in the mountains, which would be cool. Like I go a lot of hiking and spend some time in nature when I can, and the Blue Mountains are beautiful, and I know they run like a 50K and then 100K. It'd be cool to actually give myself a challenge and put myself into the ring with something like that, a little bit more different. I've done some pretty crazy strength stuff in the past with strongman and everything else, so actually shifting my attention to more longer term endurance, and it's just something that I haven't done before. And I think there's an element for me of I like to challenge myself and take myself out of the norm. and give myself something that is going to push myself out of my necessarily comfort zone that is going to be harder. And that's what I did with the 33K last year, which was the challenge. I did it. It was horrible. I fucked up the carb timing. A friend of mine, she had the gels and had these like chews, and I didn't have a chance to actually test them. She was like, "Oh, it's the brand to go for." And I'd eat my chews during the race and they were fine. And then for the last, I think I had an hour left roughly, or the last 10K it was about, or 8K. And I had the gels and it went straight to my quads. Right, I took these gels in and it just went, everything went straight to my quads and just jacked up, and to the point where I could barely move. Like the lactic acid just almost seized and cramped. So for about 2K, I think my pace dropped from 5:30 down to 8 minutes almost,
Oh,
where I was
wow.
like back moving because my quad, I couldn't bend my legs, so it's jacked up. So I learned a few lessons from doing longer endurance stuff, and there's something quite nice about getting out and doing that kind of different kind of challenge. So might put my attention to that and probably do something for charity as well. Quite fancy putting myself in the ringer and setting a goal. Like on my mum's 10 year, I pushed the sled for 10 hours with 200 kilos on it for World Cancer Day. And I think this year doing something more in line with that would be cool to work towards. So there's like deeper meaning behind it, which always motivates me more to do things like that.
Oh yeah, man, that's freaking cool. Yeah, so maybe doing a little bit more endurance style, longer kind of endurance there. I think that'll be super cool. Sweet, man. Real quick, just a last kind of topic I want to discuss is in line with what you were just saying there. When it comes to muscle, we were talking about this off air. How look, we know muscle is important, but I do feel like there's now this kind of approach in the fitness where it's, hey, just muscle at all costs, which again, I think muscle's a slow process. It's tough to build. It's not easy, right? But at what point do we start to maybe see some diminishing returns of really just pushing like muscle growth and just keep pushing muscle growth essentially? Like where do we start to maybe see some potential diminishing returns for people from that? Or do we even see that?
I think it's all relative, and this is going to depend on the person you've got coming to you. I think if you're just typically working with like bodybuilders that are stepping on stage, and sure, you're going to optimize muscle growth as much as you possibly can. But a lot of these guys, unfortunately, then can't move. And they can't move in different planes of motion, which they're going to come up with problems in terms of potential pain or pain management issues and the ability to move through range of motion in terms of passive active mobility and joint range. Like you're going to get stuck in positions. And that's what I tend to find or found with people coming to me that have come from that bodybuilding background. They've put on a lot of weight or a lot of mass, but then they're jacked up and their center of mass is so far pushed forward that they're then seeing compensations happen to their movement and what they're doing. They can't move anymore. And then when they want to go back to playing a sport, I've had some guys that want to go back to playing rugby, they can't do it, right? Because hamstrings are going, they got shoulder issues and all these things where they put on so much mass that they can't actually move the joint through good range of motion, and then they're going to compensate. So I think it's really important to understand that any type of training that we are doing, if we are looking to add muscle, we should then try and train it at full length and maintain good joint range of motion. And then also, if we're then going to be putting that into a sport specific background, we need to train other capacities. My training back in the day when I was playing rugby, it was like I'd spend off season spending some time building tissue in a hypertrophy phase. Then I'd go more into my strength phase and build on that kind of maximal strength work. Then I would go into my kind of power phase, which would be introducing contrast training and like working on that kind of plyometric elasticity and actually ability to produce force and rate of force production work. So I'm absorbing force, I'm producing force and able to use that muscle tissue in a way that makes sense for my sport. And I think that's where people need to think more longer term with their training periodization and the goals and go, okay, cool. We're going for a phase of maybe if you're doing a year bulk, which I know is quite common because if you're a natural athlete, it's going to take some time to build some tissue. All right, what are you going to do after that? We need to then, after a year of gaining, probably need to spend a bit of time in the maintenance phase, but we'll pull back on training volume. And then after that, maybe we should then think about using or going into a strength phase, right? Going a little bit more neurological. So we train those other capacities. And then maybe to make it a little bit more kind of sport specific, then you go into power, then okay, cool. Like at least we've trained the other qualities, so you're remaining athletic, then you can come back into hypertrophy. And to be honest, if you do that, you'll probably get a better response from your hypertrophy training because neurologically, if you're stronger, then your tolerance to then higher volume and loads is going to be higher. So again, as a natural athlete, I think it's actually a really smart way to train if you do it that way. Obviously, there's difference with the use of PEDs and things like that, but I think for most naturals, if you spend some time training your different qualities in terms of strength and power and those other things, you'd see a really positive impact on then your overall tissue growth and muscle growth in a way that allows you to still move and be athletic. Because that's for me always been the goal. Like I came from a rugby background. Like I've never wanted to be this guy that can't move. And it was nice actually when I was Peru, the guys be like, oh, for a big guy, you can move. I'm like, yeah, fuck him. I don't want to be that guy that's like can't run up a flight of stairs without getting out of breath. I still want to be able to do all those things. And I think it's important to be able to do all those things if you want to stay athletic.
Let's take someone. So obviously, and again, maybe you're speaking to the same person here, but let's say someone is, they're your busy professional, right? And they're not technically a athlete, right? Would that still be someone that you would have these dedicated phases to just doing more power based? Or when you say dedicated, can it be something where, hey, we keep some strength work in, you have a little, but you do some sort of like power based stuff within a training? Or do you find that it's better to have phases where you distinctly work on one thing like that at a
You can do both. I'm a big fan of contrast training where you've got your kind of strength capacity and then you go straight into a plyo. And that's, again, if we look at the kind of research on this in terms of how that will then yield better strength in your kind of loads, it's fantastic. And I think, again, that force production and absorption of force makes you more resilient. And I think we think about long-term hypertrophy training, like especially as we get older, we don't want to become this guy that is like fragile, right? Fragility is such a thing, right? So I think, again, allowing ourselves to train this absorption and production of force and jumping and landing and doing these sorts of things is only going to make you more of a robust human being. So you get less injured from things, right? And you and I both know it's like hard to train at high capacities and high yields for long periods of time without picking up loads and things like that. So exposing yourself to different positions and elasticities and absorption of force is only going to allow your body to adapt to these things in a really positive way. So I wouldn't say you necessarily need to spend too much time in it, but it's good to do it. Right. So if we're looking at long-term periodization, it's like I said, if you're doing 6 months of hypertrophy stuff, it's like, all right, well, maybe we could do 3 months of strength and then 3 months of contrast, and then we'll go back into hypertrophy. Right. You're still going to get some form of hypertrophy because, again, if we're staying within that 5 rep range, we understand that from a rep range standpoint, you still get hypertrophy work or results from a rep range of around about the 5 reps. So why not use that and utilize that and get stronger? And like doing lower rep, higher intensity for more sets, great. Like I'm there. Like I'd rather do that than do some disgusting kind of 20-30 rep leg press work. I'd rather work at heavy loads and again build the skill and capacities and that side of it for me personally.
Yeah, that makes sense. So again, it's kind of like you're saying again, you just in that situation you said there, it's again, maybe you do hypertrophy work for 6 months, a little bit of strength, but during that time, you can still do a little bit of hypertrophy. It's just how much you're doing of it and what you're going to like, how much you do will shift essentially there. Like you don't necessarily have to just cut it out completely. And like you said, you can also use different rep ranges too. And like you said, training 5 reps, you can still get some hypertrophy as well too by doing that. What about from a cardio perspective? At what point, as we're adding lean tissue, do you think it's important to continue to focus on doing conditioning in that process? Can you start to get to this point to where do people even need to worry about this, where like now they're adding muscle without doing any cardiovascular training and that could impact maybe muscle quality over time? Like what are your kind of thoughts around that?
I like this, man. This is a good segue. I think it's really important. And again, if we go back to the nervous system stuff, right, we understand that strength training and hypertrophy work is very sympathetic dominant, right? So again, typically if I've got powerlifters or people that I've worked with previously, they come in and it's just the HRV is low. And it's because all they do is just strength train at really high yields and they are sympathetically ramped. So again, like putting in some of that low intensity cardio or steady state cardio is going to help shift us back into a place of like better HRV and biomarkers. So then that's going to improve their recovery, it's going to improve their overall nervous system state, and that's probably going to allow them then to have better adaptation from their training. So I think we can utilize that. For me, I've got some guys that are pretty fucking strong that I work with, which is cool. I love working with these guys. They're athletes, they're really strong human beings, and it's to me, if they're pushing that level of intensity, I want to be working their VO2 max stuff as well, where we're keeping a relatively good VO2 max. And I typically find with human beings that have a good VO2 max, their response to not only growing muscle, but also recoverability is through the roof. Right. If they've got like a VO2 max around about that 50 mark, like I know that if I fuel them right and I train them with enough stimulus, these guys are going to grow, they're going to get strong, and they're going to be animals and they're going to look good. So for me, like I think there's a big correlation between that. Like again, if we go into the kind of like biochemistry of that, right? You and I both know if there's someone's doing like more high intensity work or the higher threshold work, you're going to stimulate more hormone sensitive lipase. That's going to help actually break down fat and use that into like essential fatty acids and use it as an energy source. For the zone 2 work, like I said, with the faster stuff, it's going to be more fat mobilization. So putting that stuff in, if we're working with a strength athlete, one allows them to have better, but also maintain good levels of body composition whilst we're still pushing in calories. So for me, it makes sense if we want someone to remain athletic, because you don't want a guy that's on the pitch that like, all right, he's strong, but he's carrying extra body fat and he can't move. It's like you want someone that's going to be able to move at the same time as well as being strong, athletic, and robust. So putting all those things together in a well-rounded training program for me makes sense to keep someone athletic and performing at a really high level.
What would you say to people that could, and I don't know if you've seen this, but it's like, hey, all you need to do is steps and weight and lift, right? What would you say to that? Are there maybe situations where that is fine for people, or are you under the kind of assumption of, hey, I want somebody to do some cardiovascular training that does get their heart rate up a little bit, no matter what your kind of goals are?
Like 100% steps. If steps are your cardio, I think that's the problem, right? Like steps should not just be your cardio. That should just be basic day-to-day movement. And unfortunately, we're in an industry where a lot of people will tell people like, oh, steps are enough. And yeah, all right, if you're looking at general movement and calorie expenditure, yes. But from a cardiovascular health standpoint, if you're not getting your heart rate up and entering those different heart rate zones and pushing those things, that's a problem long term, right? Your recoverability, your long-term health, longevity, all of these things, hormonally, nervous system regulation, everything, metabolic health, like that's an issue. And one of the research, I think the research on like the amount of people over the age of 30 that actually sprint is like what, like less than 7% or something crazy. People don't do it. And that in itself is a problem. Because we lose the capacity or we lose the capabilities to do that. So I think again, working at these higher capacities and intensities with your cardiovascular system will allow you to push harder and longer in your strength training. My strongest athletes I get to work with, like they do a lot of aerobic interval training or anaerobic intervals and things like that, put in their programming that makes sense to when we are working through these different phases to keep that yield and threshold work in there that has a really positive impact on the way they're able to perform in the gym. You and I both know, like you jump on the salt back and you do some disgusting anaerobic work, like you are tasting blood and you're finding that next level, right? And even if it's just a mindset thing, how that is then going to correlate when you're in the gym and you're pushing heavy load and you're able to push a bit more, great. We know the biochemistry side of it as well. There's a good impact there and how we utilize carbs and protein and fats and into our bloodstream and everything else. But even the mindset thing, just from pushing hard in your cardiovascular training, can really
Oh yeah,
positively carry into the way that person shows up in the gym.
absolutely. It's just a little bit different than the weights, but it's definitely good. I agree with you. I think you definitely want to push that intensity up at least a little bit there, right? And I don't know, I find it funny that people think that you should just do steps. But again, that's better than nothing, right? Okay, at least, yes, get some movement in, but come on, let's do a little bit of conditioning here and cardio and get that heart rate up a little bit.
That's it, man. We're talking gym pop and someone, Susan, who works in accounts, is struggling to actually just get to the gym 3 times a week. And the barrier to entry for her is actually just hitting 10,000 steps. And great, that's her baseline. That's what she needs to work on. But then if we're working into more performance athletes or people, it's like steps is your cardio, man, you're missing a trick here. And you're going to see some pretty positive changes by just implementing cardio. And even from a nervous system standpoint, I work with a lot of business owners and things like that. Like I just get them to do some zone 2 cardio, like minimum 60 minutes a week, 2 30-minute sessions, and the impact that they feel from that in terms of energy, how they feel, stress, and just having those 30 minutes from the times just to nasal breathe. I try to not get them to use their phones or listen to audio so they've got less inputs and just having that time in their heads to themselves. Great.
Hardest part is just getting people to actually do that. But I agree. I think doing it that way is the right way to do it. It's like nasal breathe, try not to like just sit there and work through that boredom almost in a way. I think that's a good skill to do. But again, it is very hard to get Gen Pop people to go and do that. Or just anyone, not even Gen Pop, just anyone to go and do that.
Yeah, man. The boredom thing's huge, man. We cannot be bored anymore. And I found that with the Dieta when I reduced down, like obviously I don't really watch a lot of TV anyway or anything like that, but it was like cutting down external stimulus in terms of like audio, noise, music, all of these things, and just reducing that sensory input and allowing myself to be bored and allowing myself to be bored and allow my thoughts to come online. Like the thoughts and the creative space that came up for me when I was in that headspace was fantastic. And I was like, fuck, I miss this. And I realized it's like we no longer do one thing at once. It's like when you're doing meal prep or you're cooking, you might have like a podcast on
Podcast.
or yeah, exactly. Or you listen to a voice note, wherever it might be. You're not actually present in whatever it is you're doing because you're split with attention. And taking it back to the performance thing, man, one thing I'm really focusing on this year is just being fully present in whatever I am doing. And that means really minimizing sensory input and external focus and things like that. So I've got some loop earplugs, which is why I wear to sleep. But now when I'm working, I've got loop earplugs in. Right, I'm minimizing external noise. I'm minimizing all that stuff. Like I've got one screen open. I'm doing one thing at a time, and just to try to really dial in that level of presence that allows me to then the quality of what I'm doing is better, right? Because there's less noise. So from a performance standpoint, that's where I'm focusing my attention this year, is being more present and being able to then translate that into overall better performance, less but better.
That's awesome, man. And I think that's a great way to end the conversation, kind of coming full circle. You talked about that's what you wanted to do at the beginning, and then we finished with that. A ton of great stuff in your Dave, man. Really appreciate your time. It was fun catching up. We'll have to do it again soon. Where can the audience find you?
Cool, man. Thank you, Jeff. Been a pleasure to have this conversation, man. Always glad to come on. You can find more information about me at Coach Dave Marsh on Instagram, and that's the best place to contact me or find out more about what I do and how I do it.
Sweet, man. Love it. Thanks for coming on, dude. We'll have you again out here soon.
Appreciate it, brother. Thank you.